Hey, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this talk, the next in our ongoing mental health series. In a moment, I will welcome our esteemed guests, but before doing that, I just want to thank our Education Committee under the leadership of Julie Conn for arranging this evening, and in particular to Gary Lauer, whose initiative it really was, and who has worked closely with our guest speakers in order to pull this together and to make this happen. And most importantly, welcome to all of you here for joining what I think will be a moving, informative and educational evening, and such an important conversation really for all of us to be a part of and for all of us to engage in. And as I said, part of our ongoing mental health series, which I hope will allow all of us as a community to learn more about mental health, understand it a little bit better, and probably most importantly, just us to be talking about it is in itself something valuable. Welcome to our honoured guests, to Jonny Benjamin himself, and to Michael Benjamin, Jonny's father. Jonny Benjamin, MBE, is a British mental health campaigner, an author. I think actually published two books, most well known for, I think now 3 years back, your book, The Stranger on the Bridge, and more recently, the Book of Hope, an anthology which you've published and put together. And I'm not going to share your story, you're obviously going to do this, but having very bravely, I think, spoken in public, used your social media platform to share your story, to launch the Find Mike campaign, and really since then to have spoken very widely and broadly and received viral global attention about your raising awareness of mental illness and suicide, really so important. And as a community, we really want to thank you for joining us, for giving of your time and allowing us all to learn and gain from you. The format of the evening is I think that you'll speak along with your father for perhaps some 40 minutes, and then hopefully we'll have time to open the floor also to questions. So once Jonny does finish speaking, please feel free to ask questions. You can ask them directly, you can post them on the chat function, either directly to me or if you wish directly to Jonny, and we will try and address as many of the questions as we have time to do so this evening. So I don't think I will take up any more of our time. And Jonny, thank you so much. I'm going to hand over to you, and I'll, with your permission, also spotlight you just so that everyone can see you and your father.
Sure. So thank you, Rabbi, and good evening to everyone. Also, yeah, thank you to Gary for organising this. I know it's been a good few months that we've been chatting and discussing this. So yeah, thank you, Gary, for persevering and for making this happen. As you heard, we're going to be talking about my experience of mental illness, touching on suicide, and I'll speak, and then as you heard, Dad will speak, and then yeah, please do ask us anything, any questions, any thoughts you have. We're very open. Now's a good time to really get talking about this sensitive subject. So I'm going to actually share my screen with you because I've got some photos that illustrate my journey. So I'm going to just share my screen. Hopefully you can all see this. Yeah, great. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to take you back to the very beginning of my journey. And my journey starts here. So I was born on the 31st of January, 1987 in Northwest London. And I'd say I had a typical kind of upbringing. Grew up with mum, dad, older brother, and have really happy memories of growing up. Things seem to be going well for me. So this is me with my brother at his bar mitzvah. And it was actually after this that, I don't know, things started to change slightly. I started to have problems with sleep. I was having what we call night terrors, which are really vivid nightmares that come to life. And I was becoming very sort of anxious and isolated. And obviously my parents didn't understand what was going on. And they took me to the doctors a few times, and then eventually I was referred on to a child psychologist. This is the letter to the psychologist. I saw this psychologist in Northwick Park in Harrow for a while. I don't remember much of our sessions. Obviously, I was really small at the time. But growing up, we didn't talk about mental health. No one did in society, really. In the family and, at school or at school. No one talked about mental health. I didn't understand what it was. I didn't have any concept of mental health, mental illness. I went through school and academically in school, I was doing well. I went on to JFS for secondary school when I was 11. And I found it hard to fit in at JFS at first. I don't know, I just found it hard to find my place in school. But yeah, academically, I was doing well. Had my bar mitzvah, and yeah, everything seemed okay on the outside. But I'd say it was after my bar mitzvah, I started to get these really low moods. I didn't understand what was happening. I just felt really low all the time. I'd be very tearful, and there'd be no reason. It just didn't make sense to me. Why should I be feeling like this? I didn't tell anyone. I was really embarrassed, so I kept it all to myself. But things got harder and harder, I'd say. When I was 17, I went to my doctor in secret. I didn't want my parents to know. I just wanted to deal with this on my own. And I went to my doctor, and yeah, my doctor was very good, and he referred me on to what we call CAMS. Some of you might have heard of CAMS. CAMS is the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service, so the mental health service for young people in the UK. Again, I went in secret to this appointment. I just didn't want anyone to know what was going on. I saw a psychiatrist at CAMS. This is my letter from the psychiatrist. But unfortunately, there was a long waiting list after I had my assessment. I waited months and months, and I gave up waiting, and I just said to myself, I've just got to get on with this somehow on my own. I've just got to deal with it on my own. And I actually, I decided to go to university, to Manchester, to study. I thought that I could, kind of run away from everything and start fresh. And I really thought everything was going to get better as soon as I went to Manchester. And these are all my flatmates at university. And yeah, everything came with me in my head to university. But I really thought, everyone else seemed so happy. Everyone else seemed to be enjoying life. I just thought I was the only person that was going through anything. I kept everything to myself. But things got harder at university. I started to self-harm and misuse alcohol. I really felt I was going crazy in my head. But again, I couldn't bring myself to talk about it, just too embarrassed and too ashamed. But unfortunately, everything did come out in my third year of university. I had a breakdown and I became psychotic. So by psychotic, I mean I lost control over everything I was doing and saying. Like, I felt like I was being possessed, and I ended up on the streets. I was screaming, I was shouting, and I just couldn't control what was happening, which was horrendous. Eventually, I was put into a psychiatric hospital in North London near my parents, and when I was admitted to this hospital, I was given a diagnosis of something called schizoaffective disorder. So schizoaffective disorder is like a combination of schizophrenia and bipolar. And that was a massive shock for everyone. I mean, I knew something wasn't right in my head. I knew, but I did not expect that diagnosis. And obviously it was a huge shock for my family, for my friends. And it was really tough. I was put into this hospital, and I stayed there for a month before I actually ran away from the hospital. I'd given up. I didn't see a way forwards with this diagnosis, with this illness. And yeah, a month into my stay, something kind of like something snapped in my head, and I just said that, there's only one way to really kind of get out of this this place I was in. And so I ran away. I went to a bridge in London. So fortunately for me, when I ran away and I got to this bridge, I got onto the edge, but I wasn't on there for very long when this stranger, he was walking past and he stopped next to me and he started to talk to me. And there was just something about this stranger. He was so calm and very grounded. And in the hospital where I'd run away from, I was on what they called the suicide ward. So basically someone has to sit and watch you all the time, 24/7. Someone sits and watches you, but they don't talk. They just sit and they watch. It was different with this guy. He wanted me to talk and he wanted to listen, and I hadn't been listened to like that before. There was something about just the way that he, I don't know, gave me space and really just took everything in. I hadn't had a sort of connection like that with anyone before. There was also some key things I think he said to me that really kind of got through. So the first key thing he said to me, he said, "Don't be embarrassed." And I needed to hear that from someone, because I was so embarrassed about my diagnosis. I was so embarrassed about everything in my head. To be very frank, I'd been struggling with my sexuality, and so I was feeling incredibly embarrassed and ashamed. But just for someone to say to me, just don't need to feel embarrassed, it was like a weight lifting off my shoulders when he said that. But for me, the second key thing he said, the thing that really got through, he just said to me very casually, he said, "You'll be all right. I think you'll be all right." And again, I needed to hear that from someone. In the hospital where I was, my psychiatrist was, he kept saying, "We don't know what's going to happen to you. We just don't know. We just don't know what's going to happen." But this stranger had this real positivity that I would be okay. And eventually he got through, something got through. Eventually he convinced me to come off, to go for a coffee with him. And I wanted to. As I said, I found this connection with someone I hadn't had before, and I felt safe. I felt listened to, and I came off the edge. And we were about to go for this coffee, but someone had called the police, and as soon as I got off onto the pavement, the police kind of just charged in, and it got a bit. I tried to run away. I was handcuffed and I was taken away, and that the stranger had to go the other way, and I was put into a police car and taken away. I was sectioned. I was given what we call a section 2. So being sectioned means you have to stay in hospital for a certain period of time, and that was tricky. But something in me felt a little bit different from this conversation with this guy. Something slightly had shifted. I don't know. I think I had a little bit of hope from talking to this guy, and him saying, "You'll be all right, you'll be all right." And this hope kind of carried me through the next few days and weeks and months. And it took a long time to kind of get back on track. I didn't want to address it for a long time. All of my early 20s were, I just felt completely lost. And I saw my friends graduating and getting jobs and getting married, and I just felt stuck with this illness, with this diagnosis. I didn't want therapy, and I didn't want to take my meds, and I didn't want to talk about it really. I'd say something changed in my mid-20s. In my mid-20s, I finally started to talk. I actually got help from a charity called Jamie. Maybe some of you have heard of Jamie. It's the Jewish mental health charity based in North London. I went to Jamie, and they offered me one-to-one support for quite a while, and really helped me to open up and to talk, and things really started to change as soon as I started to talk and to open up. And I felt human again. I hadn't felt human for such a long time. I felt an alien to the world, but yeah, I started to feel human again. And when I felt human again, I wanted to try and do something, to try and make a difference, to try and tell my story. And I decided to launch a search to find the guy on the bridge that I mentioned. Didn't know where he was, didn't know if it would work, but wanted to raise awareness of mental illness, but also suicide as well. Suicide, it's such a difficult subject to talk about, but we have to talk about it. And this was a way to try and get people talking. So I launched this search to find this guy. I launched it on Breakfast TV. The only problem was I wasn't 100% sure of his name. My memory from that day on the bridge was a bit hazy. I remember how he made me feel. I didn't remember some of the finer details. So I actually got his name wrong, which is very embarrassing. But I thought his name was Mike. So I called the campaign Find Mike, as you can see on the leaflet. I called the campaign Find Mike, launched it, didn't know what would happen, but the response was amazing. It started to, it went around the world. It started trending on Twitter. It was really surreal. But the most extraordinary thing happened. Within a few days, 38 different people had come forward saying, I think it was my friend that stopped you, or I think it was my cousin that stopped you. And so, within a few days, there were 38 possible leads. And the really incredible thing is that these people were genuine. They had stopped someone on a bridge. It wasn't me. That they had different stories, but all these people in London, they had stopped someone on a bridge, talked to them and just gone on their way. All these silent heroes, as we called them, really just extraordinary. Just was not expecting that at all. Thankfully, the person that I was looking for came forwards. So his name is actually Neil, not Mike. And Neil's wife saw this on Facebook. A friend of a friend of a friend had shared it, and it ended up on her Facebook feed. And she saw the post, and obviously she told Neil. And as soon as Neil saw my face, he knew straight away that was him. And thankfully he got in touch and agreed to meet. And we were reunited. That's us. Being reunited. And it's hard to put into words what that was like, being reunited. It was very emotional, I think, for both of us. Really emotional. But it was so special getting to thank him and getting to, tell him everything that happened since that day. And after that, Neil said to me, well, how can I get involved? How can I help? And so we started to work together. And we did a documentary on our story called The Stranger on the Bridge, which went out on Channel 4. And we did lots of really amazing things like running the London Marathon in 2017 for Heads Together. Heads Together is the charity that the Young Royals started. So we ran together the whole way, and so actually we ran underneath the bridge where we met all those years ago, and that was such a moment, for both of us, because we just, we looked up at that bridge, and just the journey that we'd been on was just, extraordinary. And then since then, it's been a real kind of whirlwind, I'd say. We've done lots of work together, but my personal primary focus is young people. So we know that 3/4 of all mental health issues start in adolescence. So for me, it doesn't make sense why we don't do more in schools. Been to lots of different schools to do work and to give talks, and there's so much that's needed in our schools and our colleges and our universities. There's so much work that needs to be done. I really think we're only at the beginning of this whole mental health journey. There is so much work to do. But yeah, I'm really lucky. I've got to do some really cool work. This was a trip to India about 3 years ago. And so I went to work with this in this orphanage, and this is near Mumbai. And so all of these children, they unfortunately have HIV. And because they've got HIV, it was being treated, it was being addressed. But a lot of these young people have had some trauma, but no one wanted to talk about their trauma. No one wanted to address their mental health. So we were working with the young people and with the adults on, what we call the early intervention stage or the preventative stage of mental illness. We focus on the crisis end of mental illness, but if we take it back to what we call that early intervention stage or that prevention stage, we can make a massive difference. So that's why we set up a charity in the UK called Beyond. And this is a youth mental health charity. It's all of these young people are part of our charity. They are on our youth board. And the charity essentially is, young people are the heart and soul of the charity. And we are doing lots of work in schools and colleges and universities, trying to make a difference. But there is so much need at the moment. Coming out of the pandemic and, the lockdowns, it's had a huge impact on everyone's mental health, but particularly young people. All that time away missing school or college or university, a lot of young people's mental health has been affected, and we are just not doing enough to address it. So, we are working really hard at the charity to do what we can to bring in things like mental health support into schools, into colleges, because it's just not there. The funding isn't there. That's a massive, massive problem. Myself personally, I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. Myself personally, my mental health has really fluctuated in the last few years. I've had a few relapses in my mental health. My last was actually a year ago. I was in hospital, which was really hard because of the restrictions due to the pandemic. It was, really, really tricky. But things are very different today because I talk about my mental health. I don't hide it anymore. I ask for help when I need it, which has taken me a long time, but it makes a difference to be able to really just be honest and open when I'm struggling. But I now also have a kind of toolbox of things that I can do to look after my mental health. So for me, I take medication. I've had a lot of therapy. I use different tools such as mindfulness, and I like to demonstrate what mindfulness does actually in this jar. So this jar, as you can see, is full of glitter. So this glitter kind of represents, my mind, our mind. Sometimes it can be so full and overwhelming. Sometimes, I go to bed at night and my thoughts just racing and racing and racing, or I wake up in the morning and my thoughts are just racing and racing and racing. and it's hard to get some space. What mindfulness does is it just kind of just settles everything. As you can see, the glitter is settling down in the jar. And, you know, I do this through things like meditation. But it takes work. It takes practice. It's like going to the gym, you know, to build a muscle. It takes work and it takes dedication. It takes practice. And it's the same for mindfulness as well. You know I need to work at this. But, you know, eventually I do get some space and some peace of mind. And just to know that I can find some space, even when there's lots going on, it makes such a difference to find this kind of peace of mind. But for me, you know, the thing that helps most of all is talking. And something that one of my therapists said to me, he said, it's not your fault. He said, it's the way that your brain is wired. And it really helped me when he said that. I don't know why we separate our brain and the rest of our body. You know, we cut off our heads and separate, you know, we have mental health, we have physical health. I think one day we'll just join everything up. We'll just have health maybe. So for me, thinking of my mental health as the brain, something physical, it's kind of helped me to deal with it. You know, it's no different to the brain is an organ just like the liver or the heart, but we address them differently, and that really needs to change. So yeah, for me, talking and asking for help is the key, and I'm very lucky. I've got a really, really supportive family, friends, and obviously my dad is key to my care. And at that point, actually, I'm going to hand over to him to tell you his side of the story. We think it's really important that, you know, anyone that's affected by mental illness, it's not just them that's affected, it's everyone around them. So we think it's really key that families also talk. So my dad is going to share his side of the story, and then we're going to open up for some questions. So if you've got any questions, any thoughts, please do feel free to type them in the chat or ask them out loud after Dad has finished. But going to hand you over to Dad, and then yeah, we'll take some questions.
Hi, good evening. Thank you very much for allowing us to talk to you on this difficult subject. But as Jonny said, it needs to be discussed, and certainly as a family. So basically, I'm going to talk about how it affected us and our journey. And like all journeys, there's ups and downs. So I'm just going to take you back to when Jonny was at school, JFS. We never had any issues with Jonny going to school. It was never, oh, I don't want to go to school or anything like that. And certainly when we went to JFS for the, when we saw the teachers, the reports were always excellent. So we didn't know, obviously, at that time, but Jonny was suffering. He went to Manchester and was studying drama at Manchester, and we went up. He was in a play, and it was not the easiest play. It was a very heavy play, and we went up to Manchester. It was before he came home for the winter breaks, and he didn't look well, as you probably saw from the photo. He'd lost a lot of weight, and it just wasn't well at all. We just took it down to the fact that he'd been rehearsing and as a student, not particularly looking after his own health, and we thought enjoying himself. And it was only when he came home and basically stayed in his room, didn't open the curtain, didn't do anything. This went on for about 4 or 5 days, and obviously we knew something was wrong. And believe me, 13, 14 years ago, it was just as difficult to make a doctor's appointment as it is today. So we were fortunate. We had a doctor living in the same road, so we took Jonny in to see her. And I don't think he was there more than 15 minutes. And she came out and said, Jonny's suicidal. And of course, that just completely shook us. And she said, I've already phoned and you need to take him into hospital straight away, into psychiatric hospital in Harrow. Which we did. And basically it was just a complete and utter shock because we walked in, and as we walked in, they took everything away from Jonny, his bag and phone, wires, everything else. And all they said was, we're going to put him into a suicide ward, and that was it. As far as we were concerned, that was it as far as they were concerned. Basically, all they did say was, these are the visiting hours, and by the way, if you want, you can come have lunch with him. And there was no help for us at all. Things have changed, and things have moved on, and which we'll go through a bit later on. But certainly, there was no help for us at all. So my wife and I sat in the car and just sat there because we just didn't know what to do. We phoned Jonny's brother, who's older than him, and his first reaction was anger, because why did he not talk to me? Our reaction was guilt, because why did we not know these things? Why did we not see the signs? And even nowadays, we look back and think, what did we miss? But Jonny hit it well. And basically, we were going into the hospital to see him, and we saw the psychiatrist. We sat down with the psychiatrist, with Jonny, and I call it clipboard psychiatrist because basically all it was a desk, and the three of us sitting one side, and the psychiatrist sitting the other side, and with a clipboard. And it was just questions, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about that? But he kept on looking up behind him, and we couldn't understand why until we stood up and saw that there was a clock behind him. And basically it was our time. And this carried on for a couple of weeks. I was in London. I got a call from the hospital, from this doctor, psychiatrist, to say Jonny's run away. He's now in hospital in London, St Thomas's, and if you go there, you can see him. So obviously I rushed there. I didn't know what had happened. And again, when I got there, it was January. All that Jonny had was a t-shirt on. He had some bruises on him. Didn't really know too much about what happened. And again, there was no real help for us there, no advice. They'd phoned the hospital in Harrow, and they said they're going to come and collect him. And I said, well, I can take him back. And they said, no, we'll come and collect him. And basically, they were discussing about being sectioned. Now, 13 years ago, 14, whatever it was now, time flies, as they say, I had no knowledge about what section meant. I thought it was something, a criminal record or something. Again, that was not explained to us at all. Obviously now I know it's for his own protection. But again, there was nothing at all. He did tell us that there was somebody on the bridge that talked to him, but really it was very vague about what actually happened. Jonny went back into hospital, and gradually he was coming home for a day, and then overnight, and gradually he came home. And it was a very strange time because we didn't talk about it. He didn't talk about it. We didn't have the language. We didn't know what to say. Now we know, of course, it's okay to ask somebody how they feel. And if they don't feel well, then you know what to do. But it's not only just asking someone, it's actually listening to what they have to say, because, how many times does you ask somebody, how are they? And they say, oh, not so good. And you go, oh, okay, that's... But you don't. You need to listen to what they have to say. And this carried on for quite some time, exactly the same pattern. There were a few things that really changed the way that we can talk with each other, and also more of an understanding about mental illness. Because it does affect everybody. It affects the family, it affects friends, everybody. And I know when Jonny went into hospital, we phoned our friends, we phoned people and said, Jonny's in hospital. Of course, the first thing is, did he have an accident? What's happened? But also we needed to talk as well. And we've all got lots of acquaintances, but we've probably got a handful, what we call close friends. And those are the ones we spoke to. But it was quite amazing because we spoke to one friend who we'd known for 20 years, something like that. And they actually opened up and said their son has anxiety and needs to see somebody. Now, they've never said anything because, again, those years ago, no one talked about it. Now, as I say, it's different. But what really changed was a couple of things. Obviously, there was Jonny's looking for Neil, as we now know what he's called. But also, going back, a friend of mine was diagnosed with prostate cancer, and he said to me, "Have you been tested?" And I said, "No." He said, "You should go and have a test." I said, "No, I'm fine. I don't have any symptoms." He said, "Yeah, nor did I, just to go and have a test." So I went to have a test. Unfortunately, they did find I had prostate cancer as well. That's over 6 years ago. Thank goodness. Everything's fine now. And I had my treatment. But the difference was that they told me what was going to happen. And they gave me books. And they said, if you need any help, Macmillan are there, this one, that one, the charities. And that wasn't done for us. But what happened was I came home and explained to Jonny and his brother what was going to happen. And, we started talking. And basically, if we can talk about my physical health, then why can't we talk about mental health? After all, it's health. Everybody should talk together. And really, if you go back 10 years, 8 years, no one ever talked about cancer. Now people are much more open, and as you can see, I'm fine. But also, what it taught me was that early intervention works. Because if I hadn't had that early intervention by people saying you should go and get tested, I don't know what would have happened. So this is the whole thing with the same with mental health. If Jonny would have had help when he was younger, obviously he wouldn't have been to the situation that he ended up. So this is the whole thing about early intervention. The other thing that happened was that BBC had contacted Jonny and said that they'd like to have someone that fathers and sons can talk about mental health. So we did. I mean, I think it took a day to film, and I think it was on BBC News for about 30 seconds. But however, what happened was the response was unbelievable. I've been in the clothing business all my life, and I was at a trade show, and managing director of a major company came up to me and said, "I saw you on TV. He said it was very good." He said, "Thank you for opening up." And we just thought, well, this is what is needed. We need to pass on what we've learned as well in the fact that, we should be able to talk about it. And as far as how we talked about it it's very difficult, when you're sitting having dinner or whatever to talk about it. So we started talking by having a walk, talking side by side in the car. So you're not actually facing somebody, because it is more difficult until you start that conversation. And as Jonny said, I mean, you'll always hear it. You need to talk, and the men are probably worse than anybody else, as we know, talking about anything. So what's happened now is that, as well as the charity, we also now, with Jamie, started a fathers forum, and because Jamie does a family forum, but again, no men ever went. So we now have a family forum where I suppose we now have 12, 13, 14 people, and we meet once a month. Obviously, it was over Zoom. We met for the first time face-to-face last month. We have another meeting 10 days time. We try and meet once a month. And basically, it's there to help people, and we're all on WhatsApp. So if someone's having a bad time, they know that they can speak to somebody. And sometimes we can help by signposting. When I say signposting, it's have you tried this, or have you contacted this? Because there's so many different charities. There's obviously Jamie, who do a fantastic job. There's eating disorder charities. So there's all charities, and when after we have the questions and answers, we're quite happy. We'll share them with you. There's one thing called Shout, which is a 24-hour telephone helpline. Basically, someone just texts in, so they're not actually speaking to somebody, and they don't know who they're talking to. So if it's someone that they feel that's more serious, then it's passed on to somebody more senior, although the person on the other end of the phone texting doesn't know. And sometimes, especially with young people, they go into their bedroom, they've got their telephone, social media, which is a topic on its own, that doesn't help. But however, but what we do is we talk, and if Jonny doesn't feel well, there's a difference between him speaking to us and saying, I don't feel well, to I don't feel well. We know that there's a difference, and basically we know what to do. And Jonny now sees a psychiatrist. She's fantastic. There's no desk, there's no clipboard. She's always late because she spends time, and she doesn't have a clock in her office. So it's spending time with each other, and it's talking, because what we found was that in many cases, young people, before COVID, obviously, situation was that what we found was that young people actually talking to grandparents as well, because parents are so busy. So sometimes they're talking. So you need to open that conversation. It's not easy. The first conversation is really hard, but believe me, it does get easier as it shows, because Jonny and I are here talking together. So it shows what you can achieve, but it takes time. So basically, I really want to just tell you our story. Things have moved on. There's charities now to help. I think now doctors are realizing that parents, brothers, siblings, the siblings can help, and I think it's now a lot more open now, and it does help with celebrities that come out and being open and honest, and sportsmen as well. That more and more are coming out and being very honest about how they feel. And I think also we have to think, actually, I think within the Jewish community as well, there's a lot more now that's happening. I don't think Jonny and I don't think we've spoken to so many. I don't think I've been to so many shuls that I've been to before COVID, from all over. And also we've spoken to people in Israel as well. We're going to talk there on Zoom. But I think, Jewish religion should be proud of itself, because I think definitely people are taking it on board, and more shuls are doing a lot more to help people. With that, let's just open up then to any questions that you have.
Thank you so much to both of you, to Jonny and Michael. As mentioned, please do ask questions. You can do so asking questions directly, or via posting on the chat group. There are a couple of questions that have come through either in the general chat or to me personally. So perhaps I'll just use the power of the chair and ask those questions directly, and then I don't know, Jonny or Michael, if you've had questions posted to you directly also. But I think actually a few questions have come through all along the same theme, and I'm just looking at my chat function here. And you did touch on this a little bit, but perhaps I can sort of ask it more directly. People are asking, what can we actually do? What can we do personally? What can we do communally? Many thanks coming through, obviously, for you so bravely sharing your story. What can we though do? What can you give us practical tips? Someone wrote, can you give us, I think in general to the open chat, can you give us some practical tips on how to help our children and grandchildren? This is addressed perhaps to you, Jonny. You said yourself you didn't talk to anyone and didn't want to talk. So perhaps from your perspective, and then Michael, from your perspective as a dad who perhaps initially actually wasn't aware and reacted with a lot of shock, and since then has built this wonderful and supportive relationship. So can you just give us some insight?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I think the key was people planting seeds. I didn't want to talk. I did not want to talk at the very beginning. People, if they tried to talk to me, I'd shut them down. I'd be like, I don't want to know. Don't want to know. But so people had to be patient with me. Patient, but, persevere. So, my mum, for example, she would read books on mental health and she'd leave them lying around the house. And I didn't want to know at first. But, as time went on, I started to pick these books up. Or she would, cut things out of the newspaper or the magazines and she'd, leave them around for me. And yeah, I didn't want to know at first. But gradually I started to pick these things up and actually have a look. But it took time. I think that's the thing. People want quick fixes, quick wins. But with mental health, I mean, it can take time. It can really take time. But the key is to keep persevering and not give up on someone. There's something in the world of mental health, a term that we use, which is called ask twice. So, if you think someone is struggling, ask them how they are. But, if they initially say, no, I'm fine, and you're still worried, don't be afraid to go and ask them again and again and again, in a gentle way, not in tell me what's going on, in a very gentle, easygoing way. It's so hard to open up. It really is so hard to open up. So it takes a few attempts often. But the key is to, keep persevering. So like with my brother, for example, me and my brother, we talk a lot on text, on WhatsApp. So, his way of communicating with me when I'm not well is through WhatsApp, and he'll send me just little gentle messages, and that helps. It helps. I don't want to pick up the phone and talk to him when I'm not well, but I really appreciate those like little messages, those messages encouraging me, supporting me. So yeah, I think the key for me is perseverance, but patience as well. I think that for me is key.
Yeah, what Jonny said is absolutely right, and also it's how you talk. So, I said before how we went for a walk or in the car or whatever. To sit down opposite somebody and start asking questions over dinner or something. It's not relaxing at all. So you've got to find the right opportunity, and as Jonny quite rightly said, it's asking the question, and it's not asking it in a hard tone way. It's a gentle. It's gentle. As Jonny says, it's a journey. It's a long journey. We've been on a long journey. It isn't. Unfortunately, it's not like when you break your leg and 6 weeks later, plaster comes off and it's just exercise. It's different. It is different. It's a long process. I say my wife still cuts out articles, still does the same, and leaves them around, or sends messages to say, have you seen this or have you seen that? And as I said before, it does help that, especially with young people, people like some of the groups have said, and some of the sportsmen have now come out and said, so I think it's finding that ground, that common ground, and it's just a gentle process. It really is a gentle process.
Thank you so much for those answers. In many ways, the same answer from two different angles, different sides. Someone here has asked. In fact, two people have asked the following. They said, you both shared how you did initially see psychiatrists who perhaps weren't so helpful. Jonny actually spoke very movingly about how The Stranger on the Bridge managed to give you this sense of comfort and security and sense of being listened to in a way that a professional hadn't. So how do we, people inexperienced in this field, how do we go about finding the right psychiatrist, the right therapist, getting the right help that we need, rather than perhaps so painfully and sadly having to go through that learning curve that you went through and the sort of bumps along the road as a result?
I know I said this before. The key is not giving up. I know that's easier said than done, because it's so hard and frustrating when even with some GPs as well, you know, I don't know, it's hard. It's really hard to be listened to and to, you know, I take medication and the medication has a lot of side effects, to be honest. And no one wanted to know, really. The doctors didn't want to know. The psychiatrists didn't want to know. You know, I was struggling with, I was put on something called antipsychotics. They're, a group of medications that are really strong. And I mean, things like tiredness and weight gain were a big issue for me. But trying to talk to someone about it was just so hard. And, you know, Dad and myself, we tried different psychiatrists and you know, sometimes it's just so frustrating. But eventually, we found the right fit, the right psychiatrist from a recommendation, and just knew straight away, you know, when I walked in to see her and Dad came in, there was just something different. You know, we could just feel it straight away that, you know, someone was there to really listen, not judge, just really listen and, you know, have a proper dialogue. But it took a long time to find the right person. So again, you know, don't give up. It is frustrating. It's, you know, whether it be the right therapist or the right medication or the right treatment, whatever it is, trying to find the right thing is so hard, because, you know, our mental illnesses are so individual, so unique. Even though we might have two people might have the same diagnosis, you know, different things might work for them differently. But so, you know, don't give up, keep on trying. And I know it's frustrating, but, you know, you will get, I'm lucky I got there, found the right person, and you will too if you're going through that.
It's the same, really. That's why I said about mental illness and physical illness. You know, people aren't always satisfied with their own doctor. So they then talk to other people, friends, and they give recommendation. So people move doctors, they move dentists, they move until you actually find somebody that you're happy with and that you can you feel comfortable with. And I think it's exactly the same. I mean, there are websites that you go on, and one of the psychiatrists, we realised afterwards, the website was the comments about him was, well, I don't know how he's still practicing, but I think it's exactly the same as I said. You know, you find a dentist or you find a doctor, or you have a second opinion. You know, if you are diagnosed with something, and again, it's a case of talking. And the more you talk, the more you listen. As I say, that with our Fathers Forum, unfortunately, you know, a few of them have got daughters that are suffering from eating disorders, and one has recommended somebody else, and they've gone there, and they're a lot happier. So it is a case of, you know, don't be afraid to ask the question, and, you know, these family forums can help people, really can.
Thank you. I'll ask another question that's come on the chat, but before I do that, just to remind everyone, please do post if you have questions. There are quite a few that are coming through. And if you want to ask something directly, please also, you can unmute yourself or just use the icon system on Zoom to raise your hand. And maybe, Michael, this is a question perhaps to you. You mentioned, I think quite briefly, but you touched upon, I think you said your initial feeling as parents was that of guilt. I think you mentioned that Jonny's brother felt perhaps anger. Why had Jonny not spoken to him about that? How someone has asked, how did you deal with this? How do you deal with this? Someone actually written they are in a similar situation. They do find themselves struggling to understand what their relative is going through. Some anger about it. Can you just give us some perhaps?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, the guilt feeling, to be honest with you, never really goes in some ways. I mean, I have to be honest, because you think, well, why did I not realize or whatever? So I think as a parent, you feel guilty that you didn't pick it up. As far as you know, the anger is concerned, I think also the person suffers from anger as well. But I think, as Jonny said, you know, with the, you know, his brother now, and there's bit of an age difference with them, but now it's a different relationship, and he sends messages. His wife is, Johnny's sister-in-law is fantastic, and they talk. So I think it's, yeah, how you get over it, it's a journey, and I keep on saying it is a journey. It becomes less and less because you're talking, and it helps that you talk. So the guilt sort of never really goes, but it gets less and less because you can work together, and that's what we are doing. We're working together. It's not just the people that we hope we help, but it's also helping ourselves as well, if I know if that makes any sense. But it does go. I mean, it's not easy, and it just takes time. But the guilt feeling gets less and less, because when you become more open with each other, then you can help each other.
Thank you. Also had a question here, I think from a parent who has a child perhaps suffering with with challenges to their mental health, asking about how you supported your wider family. And I think you touched on this a little bit in your answer just now, but as a parent, can you offer any insight into, how does one support the siblings? How do you support each other, uncles, aunts, cousins, grandparents who are affected by the sort of ripple effect of all of this?
Well, again, it's the same. It's the same story, really. It's talking. I mean, that's the only way you can do it, and to explain. I mean, there are books out there. There's also help as well, but also I think now that the charities now have family forums, so that families can now talk, parents can now talk. Before they didn't have it. Jamie has it. Mind, other charities have it as well, where they have family, and you can actually speak to somebody with regard to families as well. I think it's a case of, unfortunately, I hate to use the word, but there is ignorance, obviously, as far as mental illness is concerned with many people. It's become a lot more open now, but there's still that stigma. It's not as bad as it was, but there's still a stigma about how do you talk about it. So you've still got that stigma of mental health. But again, it's a case of talking about it. The other thing is as well is, the book is called Book of Hope, and I think that's the thing as well, is that like any illness, I mean, one of the things with medication, for instance, one of the doctors that Jonny saw, when he didn't want to take his medication, actually said, if someone's suffering from diabetes, they take medication. Doesn't cure it, but it controls it. And sometimes it needs to be adjusted. And it's exactly the same. It's like, I know it's not the same, but people have pills for blood pressure, it controls that. So the whole thing is actually talking things over and explaining why these things happen. And also, unfortunately, if there is a relapse, then I think you need to just explain what the situation is. And it takes time. Unfortunately, not everybody understands, but there are books, there's charities, and I recommend that somebody speaks if they are having a tough time and they need to speak to somebody, because the one thing that you have to look after, like anybody that's ill, you have to look after your own health as well. So you need to really talk yourself. You need to be open and talk. So I recommend that you contact Jamie, or we can send you some other charities that families can speak to.
Thank you. I'm conscious of the passage of time, so Jonny, forgive me for smuggling in two questions in one. One question is someone asking, they say their friends suffering from mental illness. Can you give us examples of perhaps how friends have been helpful? And the questioner asks, if you're comfortable sharing this also, examples of perhaps what was unhelpful from friends. and then maybe just an opportunity for quite a few people are asking about this, for some closing words, just about this really wonderful human being, Neil Mike. What can you tell us about what allowed him to display such ability to touch your soul in a way that professionals and many others hadn't? So perhaps a general question about friends and how they can be helpful, and then zooming in a little bit on Neil and what allowed him to find those magic words that really lifted you at that dark point in your life.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So I think for me, friends, yeah, it's interesting. It was really difficult, with my friends at the beginning. We just didn't know what to say to each other. My friends used to, if I went quiet, they'd suddenly get panicky, and they'd sit me down and they'd say, "Jonny, what's wrong? We know something's wrong." And it was really like, yeah, I just told them to, I can't do this. I can't talk like this. Now with my friends, it's really different. Like Dad said, we'll go for a walk, or, we'll go for a drive and we'll talk. As Dad said, there's this thing in mental health that we call shoulder to shoulder approach. As Dad said, it's so hard to look at someone in the eyes and talk. It's so much easier when you're shoulder to shoulder or on the phone, or, maybe like on WhatsApp, there's like voice messages, or, find different ways of communicating that works for the other person. Some people just find it too hard to sit directly and look at you and talk. So I think, yeah, for me, again, it's been a journey with my friends. None of us had any mental health education. So none of us have the mental health literacy, that we needed to talk. So it's been a journey for all of us, to be honest, but it's got easier over time. It always gets easier eventually, I think, over time, eventually. So don't give up. In terms of Neil, I mean, so Neil was working as a personal trainer. So he used to look after, people with stressful jobs, lawyers, bankers, and they would come and they would do their workout. And while they were working out, all this stuff with this stress and this anxiety would kind of pour out. So Neil says that he was used to being a listening ear to these people. So when he approached me, firstly, just to say as well, Neil's one of these people that has no filter. They just, I wish I had this quality where, Neil, if he sees danger or trouble, he'll go straight in. I will think about it, and I will worry, and I will, oh, should I do this? Or he doesn't do that. He just goes straight in and just says whatever he thinks, and, just uses his instinct so quickly. So with me, he says that he saw me and he just knew he had to come and talk to me. I wish we all had that quality where we could just do that without thinking. And so he said, he felt kind of comfortable. Obviously for him, it was, he didn't have any training. He didn't have any guidance. He just was, again, using his gut instinct and, just trying to really just be there. He says himself that, he saw me and he thought, that could be me. It's a young guy. That could be me. And, he just felt he couldn't walk past because it could be him. So yeah, he came, he stood, he really, really listened. And that for me was, everyone always asks, what did he say? What did he say? But actually it wasn't just what he said. It was his whole demeanor, how he listened with this real like calmness. When I was in the hospital, I would try and, I'd say, look, I feel suicidal. And they would say, right, medication, give medication. No one wanted to really listen. But Neil, he was able to kind of hold that real kind of pain that I was in. He didn't try and push it away, or and it's not easy. It's not easy because I've had that conversation with people where, they're in distress and they're in pain, and it's so hard to watch someone in so much pain and distress as another human being but it's so powerful when you can hold that space for them and let them really, whatever's going on, just listen and not judge. And I mean, I really recommend, there's something called mental health first aid. So I don't know if you've heard of it, but I really recommend. I mean, people like Jamie run these mental health first aid courses. There's also something called suicide first aid as well, because no one knows how to respond when someone says they are suicidal, and people need training. So, you know, there is help and guidance out there. You know, I would really recommend people looking into mental health first aid and suicide first aid. But the thing that Neil always says is that anyone can do it. You know, you don't have to be a specialist. You don't have to have training. You don't have to be a doctor. You really just need to be human. You know, just be a human being. Just really be there, however difficult it is in that moment. Just really be there for that other person. Put all your kind of fears aside and just really give that person that space that they need. It's so rare in this world, you know, especially with these phones. You know, we're all looking down. Everything is just so, we are not giving each other the connection that we need as human beings anymore. So yeah, that gift of connection is so precious. But I think anyone can do it. I think that's key.
I just, sorry if I just come in here, exactly the same for the parents as well. You need your friends around you. You need somebody to talk to that won't make any judgments as well. Jonny's friends are fantastic. Neil, it's now we've got two families, if you like, now with Neil and his family and his wife, and in fact, we managed to see them for the first time. When was it? A few weeks ago now. We went down. He's just moved, so we went and had a barbecue with him. So yeah, it's a strange feeling, but from parents or whatever, it's exactly the same. You need some close friends around you that won't make any judgments, and I think that really helps.
Thank you. I think it's rare to hear two such speakers who I think are just so inspiring in your honesty, in your modesty, in your acceptance and determination at the same time. For you to so bravely share of your story as you have done for our community and for many other communities and really globally is truly inspirational. I think, I mean, you'll touch me beyond words, and I'm sure you've touched all of us in a like manner. And those beautiful closing words that you both shared about Neil and how he's really become part of your family. You've spoken about very dark places and the ability to draw light into those dark places in the way that you have done, and to use these difficult experiences to hopefully spread that light further to others is something very special. And I think I say on behalf of all of us, we wish you both and your families, you know, good health. May you only experience henceforth good health. And on behalf of all of us in the community, thank you so much for what was really a very special and powerful experience. And I think something that we've all been moved by and touched and hopefully learned something also.